Aboard the opulent Sapphire yacht, a glittering gathering turns deadly when Sir Reginald Ashbourne is found murdered, a cryptic note clutched in his hand. You cannot hide your sins forever. Hercule Poirot, the brilliant Belgian detective, steps into a web of secrets, lies, and vengeance. A blood-stained dagger, a mysterious cry, and a past betrayal unravel a cast of suspects, each with a motive, each hiding a truth. Can Poirot's little grey cells untangle the mystery before the killer strikes again? Dive into Murder on the Sapphire Yacht, a classic Agatha Christie-style whodunit where no one is what they seem. Chapter 1. The Invitation to the Sapphire Yacht. The late summer sun cast a golden sheen over the waters of the English Channel, where the Sapphire Yacht lay anchored off the Dorset coast. The vessel, a gleaming monument to opulence, bobbed gently against the tide, its polished decks reflecting the light like a mirror. It was the pride of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, a shipping magnate whose fortune had been built on steel and ambition. The yacht, with its sleek lines and towering masts, was no mere pleasure craft. It was a floating palace, a testament to wealth and taste, and tonight it played host to a gathering that promised both delight and intrigue. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal chronicler of Hercule Poirot's exploits, stood at the railing, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes scanning the horizon. The sea was calm, a rare serenity that belied the undercurrent of tension he felt among the guests aboard. Hastings had been invited at the insistence of Sir Reginald himself, who had written to him with a curious blend of warmth and urgency. "My dear Hastings," the letter had read, "your presence would do me great honor, and I dare say your friend, the estimable Monsieur Poirot, might find amusement in our little gathering. A week aboard my yacht, surrounded by the finest company, is an opportunity not to be missed." Hastings, ever susceptible to the allure of luxury, had accepted at once, though he had yet to persuade Poirot to join him. The guest list was as glittering as the crystal chandeliers in the yacht's dining saloon. Sir Reginald, a widower of 60 with a mane of silver hair and a penchant for grand gestures, presided over the affair with the air of a benevolent monarch. His daughter, Miss Evelyn Ashbourne, a striking woman of 20 markets and margins. Finally, there was Miss Clara Duval, a French actress whose beauty was matched only by her enigmatic silence. She seemed to observe the others as if they were players in a drama of her own devising. The evening had begun with cocktails on the deck, the air filled with the clink of glasses and the murmur of polite conversation. Hastings, ever the observer, noted the subtle currents of unease beneath the surface. Sir Reginald's joviality seemed forced, his laughter a touch too loud. Evelyn's smile faltered when she thought no one was watching. Dr. Carver's eyes flicked toward Lady Margaret with a mixture of amusement and disdain, while Langston's gaze followed Evelyn with an intensity that bordered on possessive. Only Miss Duval appeared untouched by the undercurrents, her serene expression as impenetrable as the sea itself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the deck in shades of violet and gold, Sir Reginald clapped his hands for attention. "My dear friends," he boomed, his voice carrying over the lapping waves, "tonight we dine in splendor, but first, a toast to good company and fair winds." The guests raised their glasses, but Hastings noticed that Evelyn's hand trembled slightly as she sipped her champagne. He made a mental note to mention it to Poirot when, if, he arrived. The dining saloon was a marvel of mahogany and brass, its long tables set with silver and porcelain. The meal was a triumph: lobster bisque, roast pheasant, and a dessert of crème brûlée that melted on the tongue. Yet the conversation, though lively, carried an edge. Lady Margaret regaled the table with tales of her youth, each story more scandalous than the last, while Dr. Carver countered with dry observations on human folly. Langston spoke of a recent deal that had netted him a fortune, his tone implying that such success was inevitable. Evelyn, seated at her father's right, said little, her eyes darting to the clock above the mantel. Miss Duval, opposite her, offered only the occasional murmured comment, her French accent soft but deliberate. It was nearing 10 o'clock when the first hint of trouble emerged. The steward, a wiry man named Jenkins, entered the saloon with a silver tray, upon which rested a single envelope. "For you, Sir Reginald," he said, his voice deferential but strained. Sir Reginald took the envelope. "Captain Hastings," she said, her voice low. "You are a friend of Monsieur Poirot, are you not?" "I am," Hastings replied, surprised by her directness. "Though I must confess, he has not yet confirmed whether he will join us." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "I wish he would. There is something amiss here. I cannot say what, but I feel it." She hesitated, then added, "My father received a letter tonight. It upset him greatly, though he would not say why." Hastings, ever gallant, offered a reassuring smile. "I'm sure it's nothing serious, but I shall write to Poirot at once and urge him to come. He has a way of seeing what others miss." Evelyn nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "Thank you, Captain. I hope you are right." As she returned to the lounge, Hastings lingered, his thoughts racing. The sapphire yacht, for all its splendor, felt like a stage set for a drama yet to unfold. He resolved to send a telegram to Poirot at the earliest opportunity, for if there was trouble brewing, there was no one better suited to unravel it. The night deepened, and the guests retired to their cabins. Hastings, unable to shake his unease, made his way to the ship's telegraph office. His message to Poirot was brief but urgent. "Trouble aboard Sapphire Yacht. Your presence needed. Hastings." As he handed the slip to the operator, a distant cry pierced the silence, a sharp, anguished sound that seemed to come from the upper deck. Hastings froze, his heart pounding. The operator too looked up, his face pale. "What was that?" Hastings demanded. "I don't know, sir," the man replied, his voice trembling. "But it didn't sound good." Hastings hurried toward the source of the sound, his footsteps echoing on the polished wood. The deck was deserted, the moonlight casting long shadows. At the far end, near the railing, he saw a figure slumped against a chair. As he drew closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was Sir Reginald Ashbourne, his silver hair glinting in the moonlight, his body still. A dark stain spread across his chest, and in his hand, clutched tightly, was the envelope he had received at dinner. Hastings knelt beside him, his fingers searching for a pulse. There was none. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, master of the Sapphire Yacht, was dead. The stage was set, pointed to a crime of deliberate intent. Murder, Hastings thought, the word chilling him more than the sea breeze. He straightened, his soldier's instincts urging action, though his heart clamored for the calm precision of his friend, Hercule Poirot. The cry that had drawn Hastings to the deck had faded, but its echo lingered in his ears. He glanced around, half expecting to see a figure darting into the shadows, but the deck was empty save for the body and the faint creak of the yacht's timbers. The envelope in Sir Reginald's hand caught his eye again, its edge peeking from his clenched fingers. Hastings hesitated, knowing Poirot would disapprove of disturbing the scene, but curiosity tugged at him. Carefully he eased the paper free, noting the elegant script on its surface. To Sir Reginald Ashbourne, private. The seal was broken, and inside was a single sheet, but before he could read it, footsteps approached. "Captain Hastings!" It was Jenkins, the steward, his face ashen in the moonlight. "What's happened? I heard a cry." "Fetch Dr. Carver at once," Hastings interrupted, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "And rouse the crew. No one is to leave the yacht." Jenkins nodded, his eyes wide as they fell upon Sir Reginald's body. He turned and hurried below, leaving Hastings alone once more. The weight of responsibility pressed upon him. He slipped the envelope into his pocket, resolving to show it to Poirot when he arrived. For now, he must secure the scene and ensure the guests remained unaware until order could be restored. Within minutes, Dr. Lionel Carver appeared, his medical bag in hand, and his expression one of grim professionalism. The physician knelt beside Sir Reginald, his fingers probing for signs of life. "He's gone," Carver said after a moment, his voice clipped. "A single wound to the chest, likely a knife. Death was swift, I'd wager, within the last half hour." Hastings nodded, his mind cataloguing the details. "Can you say anything about the weapon?" Carver frowned, examining the wound. "Narrow blade, clean entry, not a butcher's work, Someone knew what they were doing. I'll need to examine him further, but not here. The crew should move him to the infirmary. As if on cue, 2 crewmen arrived, their faces pale but resolute. Hastings glinting as she fanned herself with a lace handkerchief. Victor Langston leaned against the bar, his eyes narrowed, while Clara Duval sat apart, her serene expression unchanged, though her fingers toyed with the edge of her shawl. The air was thick with unspoken questions. Hastings cleared his throat. I regret to inform you that Sir Reginald has been found dead. It appears to be foul play. A gasp escaped Lady Margaret, her hand flying to her throat. Dead? Murdered, you mean? Her voice trembled, though her eyes gleamed with a curiosity that belied her shock. Evelyn's composure cracked, her hands trembling as she stepped forward. My father? No, it cannot be. Who would do such a thing? Her voice broke, and she sank into a chair, her eyes searching Hastings' face for answers. Langston's voice cut through the silence, sharp and calculating. Where was he found, and how? On the upper deck, Hastings replied, choosing his words carefully. He was stabbed. Dr. Carver has confirmed it. All eyes turned to Carver, who nodded gravely. I've seen the body. It's as Captain Hastings says. The police will need to be informed, but we're miles from shore. For now, we must preserve the scene. Police? Lady Margaret's tone was indignant. Surely we can handle this among ourselves. A yacht full of respectable people. Respectable people can kill, Clara Duval said softly, her first words since the announcement. The room fell silent, her accent lending an air of quiet authority. Monsieur Hastings, you are a friend of Hercule Poirot, no? Will he come? I've sent for him, Hastings said, grateful for the shift in focus. He'll be here by morning, I expect. Until then, I ask that everyone remain calm and stay in their cabins. Langston snorted. You expect us to sit idly while a murderer roams free? I expect you to cooperate, Hastings said firmly. Poirot will want to speak with each of you. For now, the crew will ensure no one leaves the yacht. The guests dispersed, their murmurs trailing behind them like ripples in the water. Hastings lingered, his thoughts turning to the envelope in his pocket. He slipped into a quiet corner of the lounge and unfolded the note. The message was brief, written in a hurried hand. You cannot hide your sins forever. Tonight you pay. No signature, moustache and polished shoes unmistakable even from a distance. Poirot stepped aboard, his eyes scanning the deck with the precision of a watchmaker. Mon ami Hastings, he said, his voice warm but tinged with reproach. You have a talent for finding trouble, n'est-ce pas? Tell me everything. Hastings recounted the events of the night, from the cry to the discovery of the body to the mysterious note. Poirot listened, his head tilted slightly, his fingers steepled before him. When Hastings finished, Poirot nodded. A murder on a yacht, surrounded by water, with nowhere to flee. It is, how you say, a perfect stage for a crime. And this note, may I see it? Hastings handed over the envelope, watching as Poirot examined it with care. The paper is fine, the ink fresh, Poirot murmured, and the handwriting, deliberately disguised perhaps. This is no idle threat, Hastings. It is a declaration of intent. He turned his gaze to the horizon, his eyes narrowing. We have a circle of suspects, each with their secrets, no doubt. The daughter, grieving yet guarded. The doctor, too calm for my liking. The financier, whose ambition may outstrip his morals. The actress, who sees more than she says. And the dowager, whose scandals may hide darker truths. We shall begin with the scene of the crime. Poirot moved toward the upper deck, his steps deliberate, his mind already at work. Hastings followed, knowing that the little Belgian detective's grey cells were already piecing together the threads of this sorrowful mystery. The sapphire yacht was no longer a haven of luxury. It was a prison, and somewhere among its guests lurked a killer. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The morning sun bathed the sapphire yacht in a deceptive glow, its rays glinting off the polished brass fittings as if to mock the grim events of the previous night. Hercule Poirot stood on the upper deck, his small, immaculate figure a stark contrast to the sprawling chaos of a murder scene. His black patent leather shoes gleamed, his moustache was perfectly waxed, and his green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, surveyed the spot where Sir Reginald Ashbourne had met his end. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside him, his nerves still taut from the discovery of the body, his admiration for Poirot's calm Poirot nodded, producing the note from his pocket. "You cannot hide your sins forever. Tonight you pay." He read it aloud, his French accent lending the words an ominous weight. "This is no casual threat, Hastings. It is personal, deliberate. The killer wished Sir Reginald to know his fate before it was delivered. But why leave the note? Why not take it after the deed?" "Perhaps they were interrupted," Hastings suggested. "I heard the cry after all. Someone might have been close." "Précisément," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "The cry is important. You say it was sharp, anguished, a man's voice or a woman's?" Hastings frowned, replaying the moment. "I couldn't say for certain. It was brief and I was below deck, but it was desperate." Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. He turned his attention to the railing, running a finger along its edge. No signs of a struggle, no scratches or scuffs. The killer was swift, efficient, and yet Sir Reginald sat here, alone, in the moonlight. Why? What drew him to this spot at such an hour? Before Hastings could answer, Jenkins, the steward, approached, his face drawn. "Monsieur Poirot, sir, the crew's accounted for everyone. No one's left the yacht, and the launch is secured. The guests are in the lounge as you requested." "Bon," Poirot said, straightening. "Let us meet these players in our little drama. But first, Hastings, tell me of the guests. You have observed them. What are your impressions?" Hastings hesitated, knowing Poirot's knack for seeing through superficial judgments. "Well, there's Evelyn Ashbourne, Sir Reginald's daughter. She's shaken naturally, but there's a strength to her, though she seemed uneasy even before the murder. Dr. Carver is calm, almost too calm, like he's seen death before and it doesn't faze him. Lady Margaret Thorne is all theatrics, but I suspect she's sharper than she lets on. Victor Langston, the financier, strikes me as ruthless, ambitious certainly, and Clara Duval, the actress, is hard to read. She says little, but her eyes miss nothing." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "You see much, Hastings, but you do not yet see. The heart of a mystery lies not in what is said, but in what is left unsaid. Come, let us begin." The lounge was a study in posture serene but her gaze alert, like a cat watching a room full of mice. Poirot entered with a quiet dignity, his presence commanding attention without effort. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I have been called to investigate the tragic death of Sir Reginald Ashbourne. A murder has been committed, and the murderer is among us. I ask for your cooperation as I seek the truth." A murmur rippled through the group. Lady Margaret's fan paused mid-air. "Among us? Surely you don't mean one of us." Her tone was indignant, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Poirot's smile was polite but unyielding. "I mean precisely what I say, Lady Margaret. A yacht is a closed world, and no one has left this one. Therefore the killer is here. I will speak with each of you in turn, and I assure you, no detail is too small for Hercule Poirot." He began with Evelyn, inviting her to a small sitting room off the lounge for privacy. She sat stiffly, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite her grief. "My father was a good man, but he had enemies. His business dealings were complex." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes gentle but probing. "Enemies, mademoiselle? Can you name them?" Evelyn hesitated, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. "No one specific, but he received letters, threatening ones, like the one you found. He wouldn't speak of them, but they worried him." "And last night," Poirot pressed, "you spoke to Captain Hastings of your unease. Why?" She looked away, her jaw tightening. "I felt watched, as if someone was waiting for something to happen. And that note at dinner, it changed him. He tried to hide it, but I saw his fear." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci, mademoiselle. For now, that is all. Next was Dr. Carver, whose calm demeanor intrigued Poirot. The physician sat with an air of quiet confidence, his hands folded in his lap. I examined the body, Monsieur Poirot, he said without prompting. A single stab wound, as I told Hastings. The blade was narrow, likely a dagger or letter opener. Death was instant. Most elusive, her answers brief and cryptic. I saw nothing, Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice like silk. But Sir Reginald was not a man at peace. He carried a weight, no? As Poirot concluded the interviews, he returned to the lounge, where Hastings awaited. Well, Poirot, Hastings asked, what do you make of it? Poirot's eyes twinkled. They all lie, Hastings, in their own way. Some lie with words, others with silence. But the truth, it is in the details. The note, the cry, the timing of the dinner. We must reconstruct the evening, minute by minute. He produced a small notebook and began sketching a timeline, noting the guests' alibis and movements. The cry was heard at 10:15, you say. Dinner ended at 9:30. Where was each guest between those times? And why was Sir Reginald alone on the deck? Hastings frowned. Evelyn said she felt watched. Could someone have lured him there? Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice low. But first, we must examine the body. Dr. Carver is competent, but Hercule Poirot trusts only his own eyes. As they made their way to the infirmary, the yacht seemed to close in around them, its opulence now a gilded cage. The mystery was deepening, and Poirot's little grey cells were only beginning to stir. Note, Poirot, it's chilling. You cannot hide your sins forever. What sins could Sir Reginald have had? Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. All men have sins, Hastings. The question is, which of Sir Reginald's were grave enough to provoke murder? He tucked the note away and turned to the door. Come, we must speak with the crew and examine the scene further. The answers lie in the details, the little grey cells. They demand precision. The upper deck, where Sir Reginald had been found, was cordoned off by the crew at Poirot's instruction. The chair, now empty, stood as a silent witness, its cushions slightly askew. Poirot paced the area, his eyes darting from the railing to the deck, then to the horizon. The cry you heard, Hastings, at what time precisely? 10:15, Hastings replied, consulting his watch as if to confirm the memory. I was in the telegraph office when it came, sharp and sudden. Poirot nodded, his fingers tapping his chin. And the dinner ended at 9:30. Sir Reginald received the note at what, 9 o'clock? He was alive then, but by 10:15 he was dead. We must account for those 45 minutes. Who saw him last? Hastings frowned, piecing together the evening. Evelyn spoke to me on the deck just after 10, but she didn't mention seeing her father. The others were in the lounge for coffee, or so they claimed. Claimed, Poirot repeated, his tone laced with skepticism. We shall verify. Let us speak with Jenkins, the steward. He is, how you say, the eyes and ears of this yacht. Jenkins was found in the galley, overseeing the preparation of a subdued breakfast for the guests. The steward, a wiry man with a nervous air, straightened at Poirot's approach. Monsieur Poirot, sir, I've kept the crew in line as you asked. No one's touched the deck. Bon, Poirot said, his gaze piercing. Tell me, Monsieur Jenkins, what did you see last night? You delivered the note to Sir Reginald at dinner. Did you know its contents? Jenkins paled, his hands fidgeting. No, sir, it was sealed, handed to me by one of the crew who said it came from the mainland before we sailed. I didn't read it. And after dinner, Poirot pressed. Where was Sir Reginald? He stayed in the dining. Everyone. Poirot's expression remained impassive, but Hastings could tell his mind was racing. And you, Monsieur Jenkins? Where were you at 10:15? In the galley, sir, Jenkins said quickly, checking the stores with the cook. We heard the cry, same as Captain Hastings. Merci, Poirot said, dismissing the steward with a nod. As Jenkins retreated, Poirot turned to Hastings. The alibis, they are vague, no? We must be methodical. Let us visit Sir Reginald's study. If the weapon is from this yacht, it may be there. The study, located on the lower deck, was a sanctuary of dark wood and leather-bound books. Sir Reginald's desk was cluttered with papers, shipping contracts, financial ledgers, and a map of the Channel marked with trade routes. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, lingering on a silver letter opener on the desk. He picked it up, examining its blade. "Too broad," he murmured, setting it down. "But this room, it holds secrets. Look, Hastings, the papers are in disarray, yet Sir Reginald was a man of order." Hastings peered at the desk, noticing a half-opened drawer. Could someone have been searching for something? "Perhaps," Poirot said, his fingers brushing the drawer's edge. Inside were more letters, some bearing the same elegant script as the note found with the body. Poirot read one aloud. "Your greed will be your undoing. Repent or face justice." The signature was absent, but the tone was unmistakable. "Another threat," Hastings said, his voice low. "Someone had a vendetta against him." Poirot nodded, slipping the letter into his pocket. "We must learn more of Sir Reginald's past. His daughter spoke of enemies, but who, and why now?" Returning to the lounge, Poirot gathered the guests once more. Their faces were a study in contrasts: Evelyn's grief, Carver's detachment, Lady Margaret's agitation, Langston's impatience, and Clara's serene watchfulness. Poirot stood at the centre, his presence commanding silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "I have examined the body and the scene. Sir Reginald was killed with a narrow blade, likely a dagger, between 9:45 and 10:15. Each of you claims to have been elsewhere, but alibis must be tested. I ask you now, who saw Sir Reginald after dinner?" A tense silence followed, so I returned to the lounge. Poirot's gaze lingered on her. "You are precise, mademoiselle. And what was his demeanour?" "Troubled," she said simply, "as if he carried a great burden." The room fell silent again, the weight of her words settling over them. Poirot nodded, his mind clearly at work. "Merci. I will speak with each of you again. For now, remain on the yacht. The truth, it will not hide for long." As the guests dispersed, Hastings leaned in. "What do you think, Poirot? Clara's the only one who admits to seeing him. Could she be involved?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "She tells the truth, perhaps, but not all of it. They all hold pieces of the puzzle, Hastings. We must find the pattern." The yacht seemed to tighten around them, its luxury a facade for the secrets it held. Poirot's little grey cells were in motion, and Hastings knew the questions were only beginning. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The sapphire yacht shimmered under the midday sun, its polished surfaces reflecting a deceptive calm that belied the dark undercurrents swirling among its passengers. Hercule Poirot, his meticulous nature undeterred by the rising tension, sat in the yacht's library, a small room lined with oak shelves and leather-bound volumes. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the endless expanse of sea, though his thoughts were tethered to the mystery at hand. Poirot's notebook lay open on the table, its pages filled with neat timelines, alibis, and cryptic notes in his precise handwriting. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the silence, "the mind of the murderer is like a tapestry, woven with threads of motive, opportunity, and deception. We have the threads, but the pattern eludes us. Let us consider the alibis once more, for among them lies a falsehood." Hastings turned, his brow furrowed. They all claimed to have been elsewhere when Sir Reginald was killed. Clara Duval saw him on the deck at 10. Langston spoke to him at 9:50, and the others were in the lounge or their cabins. But that cry at 10:15, it's the key, isn't it? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Précisément. The cry marks the moment of death or near it. Yet no one admits to being near Sir Reginald at that time, save Mademoiselle Duval, who claims she left him alone. We must from where Sir Reginald was found. Hastings' eyes widened. Langston? Could he have dropped it during the murder? Poirot's expression remained impassive. It is possible, Hastings, but too convenient, no? A cigarette case left so prominently. It is like a signpost pointing to guilt. We shall see what Monsieur Langston has to say. They found Langston in the lounge, his lean frame slouched in an armchair, a glass of whiskey in hand. His eyes, sharp and calculating, flicked up as Poirot approached. What now, Poirot? More questions? His tone was laced with irritation, but there was a wariness beneath it. Poirot held up the cigarette case, its silver surface catching the light. "This belongs to you, Monsieur Langston, does it not?" Langston's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "It's mine. Where did you find it?" "Near the scene of the crime," Poirot said, his voice soft but unyielding. "Can you explain how it came to be there?" Langston's eyes narrowed, but he leaned back, his composure intact. "I was on the deck earlier in the evening smoking. Must have dropped it then. I didn't notice it was missing until now." Poirot tilted his head, his gaze piercing. "And when were you on the deck precisely?" "After dinner, around 9:30, Langston said. "I spoke with Sir Reginald in the saloon, then stepped out for a cigarette. I was back in the lounge by 10. "Yet Mademoiselle Duval saw Sir Reginald on the deck at 10, Poirot said. "Alone. Did you see her?" Langston hesitated, his fingers tightening around his glass. "No, I didn't see anyone. I was only out there for a few minutes." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, Monsieur Langston. For now, that is all." As they left the lounge, Hastings leaned in. "He's lying, isn't he? That cigarette case, it's too damning." Poirot's lips twitched. "Perhaps, Hastings, but a lie is only useful if it hides a greater truth. The cigarette case is a red herring, meant to distract. The question is, who placed it there? Langston himself to explain its presence, or another to cast suspicion?" Their next stop was the crew's quarters, where Poirot interviewed the deckhand who had found the cigarette case. The young man, a nervous lad named Tom, confirmed he'd found it. Detailed account of the dinner from the crew. The head waiter, a dour man named Harris, recounted the evening's events. The delivery of the note at 9, Sir Reginald's brief agitation, and the guests' movements afterward. "Miss Evelyn left the saloon first," Harris said. "She seemed upset. Mr. Langston stayed with Sir Reginald, talking business. The others lingered over coffee in the lounge." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the note, who handed it to Jenkins?" Harris frowned. "One of the shore crew, before we sailed. I didn't see who." Poirot made a note, his pencil moving with precision. "The note is the key, Hastings. It set this tragedy in motion. We must learn its origin." As the day wore on, whispers of suspicion spread among the guests. In the lounge, Lady Margaret's voice carried, her tone a mix of fear and indignation. "That Langston fellow, he's always been too ambitious. Dropping his cigarette case, it's as good as a confession." Evelyn, seated nearby, flinched at the words. "You can't believe that, Lady Margaret. Victor wouldn't he?" Lady Margaret interrupted, her fan snapping shut. "He's been after your father's business for years. Everyone knows it." Dr. Carver, reading in a corner, looked up. "Let's not jump to conclusions. The police will sort it out when we reach shore." Clara Duval, silent until now, spoke softly. "The police will see only what is shown to them. Monsieur Poirot, he sees what is hidden." Her words drew all eyes, but she said no more, her expression serene. Poirot, entering the lounge at that moment, caught the tail end of the conversation. "Mademoiselle Duval is correct," he said, his voice commanding attention. "The truth is not always what it seems. Monsieur Langston's cigarette case is a clue, yes, but not necessarily to his guilt. I urge you all to be patient and truthful." The guests exchanged glances, their unease palpable. Poirot's presence was like a magnifying glass, exposing every flaw and fear. Hastings, watching, felt a pang of admiration for his friend's ability to unsettle without raising his voice. As evening approached, Poirot and Hastings returned to the library. Poirot spread his notebook on the table, his timeline now a web of names, times, and movements. "See here, Hastings," he said, pointing to a gap between 9:50 and 10:15. Atmosphere was far from festive. The guests ate in near silence, their eyes darting to Poirot, who observed them with quiet intensity. Hastings knew the red herrings were multiplying, but Poirot's little grey cells were already sifting through the deception, seeking the truth beneath the lies. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The sapphire yacht glided through the calm waters of the English Channel, its serene motion a stark contrast to the storm of suspicion brewing within its opulent confines. Hercule Poirot sat in the library, his small, neat figure bent over a mahogany table, his notebook a map of the mystery unfolding around him. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the window, his eyes tracing the horizon, though his thoughts were fixed on the cryptic clues that seemed to multiply with each passing hour. The silver cigarette case, the threatening note, the anguished cry at 10:15, all were pieces of a puzzle that Poirot's little grey cells were determined to solve. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the quiet, "we have alibis, we have motives, but we lack the thread that binds them. The truth lies in the details. The smallest inconsistency can unravel the greatest deception." He tapped his pencil against the notebook, where a timeline of the fatal evening was meticulously drawn. "Let us revisit the scene of the crime. There is something we have missed." They returned to the upper deck, now bathed in the soft light of late afternoon. The chair where Sir Reginald Ashbourne had been found was untouched, its cushions still slightly askew. Poirot knelt beside it, his magnifying glass in hand, his eyes scanning the deck with the precision of a jeweller. "The blood was here," he murmured, pointing to a spot now cleaned but marked in his memory. Sir Reginald sat facing the sea. The killer approached. From which direction? Hastings gestured toward the stairs leading from the lower deck. The crew said no one was seen coming from the bow or stern. The stairs are the only access to this part of the deck. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to the railing. And yet, the cigarette case was found there, under a coil of rope. Too convenient, as I said. But look, Hastings, here. He pointed to a faint scuff mark on the deck, barely visible against the polished wood. A shoe, perhaps, dragged in haste, not deep but deliberate. The killer moved quickly. Urgent. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Bon, let us hear what Mademoiselle Ashbourne has to say. Evelyn's cabin was a study in understated elegance, its walls adorned with delicate watercolors of the Dorset coast. She sat on a velvet chaise, her auburn hair loose about her shoulders, her hands twisting a silk scarf. Her eyes, red-rimmed but resolute, met Poirot's as he entered. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "I couldn't speak freely in front of the others. There's something you must know." Poirot sat opposite her, his posture attentive. "Speak, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot listens." Evelyn took a deep breath. "My father was not himself these past months. He was receiving those letters, threats like the one you found. He wouldn't show them to me, but I saw one once on his desk. It mentioned a betrayal and a debt unpaid. I think it was about his business." Poirot's fingers steepled before him. "A betrayal, you say? Did he speak of anyone in particular? A rival, perhaps?" Evelyn hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. "He mentioned Victor Langston once in anger. They had a deal, a merger of their shipping interests, but it fell through. Father said Victor was too greedy, that he wanted control. But there was something else, something personal. I overheard him speaking to someone on the telephone weeks ago. He said, 'You can't hold that over me forever.' I don't know who it was." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this conversation, when did it take place?" "About a month ago," Evelyn said, "before we planned this trip. I hoped it was nothing. But now—" Her voice broke and she looked away. "Merci, mademoiselle," Poirot said gently. "Your candor is most helpful. One last question. Where were you at 10:15 when the cry was heard?" Evelyn's eyes widened, but she answered firmly. "I was on the deck speaking with Captain Hastings. I returned to the lounge just before 10:15. I heard the cry from there." Poirot nodded, rising. "Rest, mademoiselle. We will speak again." Back in the library, Poirot shared Evelyn's revelation with Hastings. "A betrayal, a debt unpaid," he mused. "This points to a motive rooted in the past. Langston is implicated, yet the cigarette case suggests a clumsy attempt to incriminate him." Complied, unaware of Poirot's true intent. By midnight, the shoes were in the library, lined up like suspects. Poirot examined each pair, his magnifying glass hovering over soles and heels. Lady Margaret's elegant pumps showed no marks. Clara Duval's delicate flats were pristine. Dr. Carver's sturdy brogues had a faint scuff, but it was too broad. Evelyn's low heels were clean, but Langston's polished loafers bore a faint, narrow mark on the left sole, matching the deck's scuff. Hastings' eyes widened. "Langston again? First the cigarette case, now this? Poirot's expression was enigmatic. It is too perfect, Hastings. The cigarette case, the scuff, they point too directly. I suspect a trap, meant to mislead. We must look beyond the obvious. As the guests retired, Poirot lingered in the library, his notebook open. He added the scuff mark to his timeline, noting its implications. The killer is clever, he said to Hastings. They wish us to chase Langston, but why? To hide their own guilt, or to settle another score? Hastings shook his head. It's a tangle, Poirot. The note, the cry, the cigarette case, now this mark. How do they fit? Poirot's eyes twinkled. They fit, Hastings, because there is a pattern. The note speaks of sins, the cry of desperation, the cigarette case of distraction, and the scuff of haste. We are close, mon ami, to the truth. The yacht's bell rang, signaling the end of another day. The guests' faces, Evelyn's grief, Carver's calm, Lady Margaret's agitation, Langston's wariness, Clara's serenity, were a gallery of motives, each hiding a piece of the truth. Poirot closed his notebook, his mind alight with possibilities. The clue in the scuff mark had sharpened the mystery, but the little grey cells were far from finished. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The sapphire yacht lay cloaked in the twilight's soft embrace, its silhouette a dark sentinel against the fading light of the English Channel. Within its opulent walls, the air was thick with suspicion, each guest a player in a game of shadows and secrets. Hercule Poirot, his meticulous mind a beacon of clarity, sat in the yacht's library, his notebook open to a page dense with notes and diagrams. Captain Arthur Hastings stood points too neatly, like a stage set for a play. The true murderer wishes us to chase shadows, while they remain in the light. We must uncover their motives, their secrets. Let us begin with the past of Sir Reginald. The morning had brought a new discovery, one that Poirot had kept close until now. Among the papers in Sir Reginald's study, tucked inside a locked drawer that Poirot had coaxed open with a paperclip, was a bundle of letters, each bearing the same elegant, disguised script as the threatening note found with the body. The most recent, dated a week before the voyage, read, "Your betrayal will cost you dearly. The sea will not hide your guilt." Unlike the others, this one was signed with a single initial, M. Poirot showed the letter to Hastings, his expression grave. This M, it could be anyone. Margaret, perhaps, or a name we have not yet encountered. But it confirms what Mademoiselle Evelyn told us. Sir Reginald was haunted by his past. Hastings frowned. Betrayal again. Evelyn mentioned a business deal with Langston that went sour. Could that be it? Perhaps, Poirot said, but betrayal is a word with many meanings. Business, love, trust. We must learn more of Sir Reginald's life. Let us speak with the guests again, but this time we shall press harder. The lounge, where the guests had gathered for an uneasy luncheon, was a stage for suppressed emotions. Evelyn Ashbourne sat by the window, her face pale but composed, her eyes fixed on the sea. Dr. Lionel Carver sipped coffee, his demeanour as calm as ever, though his gaze flicked toward Evelyn with a trace of concern. Lady Margaret Thorne, her diamonds catching the light, spoke in hushed tones to Clara Duval, who listened with her usual serene detachment. Victor Langston stood apart, his jaw set, his fingers drumming on the bar. Poirot entered, his presence silencing the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice clear and deliberate. "The investigation progresses, but the truth remains elusive. Each of you holds a piece of Sir Reginald's life, and I must ask you to share it. Tell me, what did you know of his past?" A tense silence followed. Lady Margaret broke it, her fan snapping open. "Really, Monsieur Poirot, must we air dirty laundry? Reginald was a gentleman, a pillar of society."
"Entirely, Miss Ashburn. Your father outmaneuvered many, including me. Our merger fell apart because he reneged on terms we'd agreed upon. He cost me millions." Evelyn's eyes flashed. "You're lying, Victor. You wanted control, and when he refused, you turned against him." Langston's face darkened, but before he could respond, Clara Duval spoke, her voice soft but commanding. Monsieur Poirot, Sir Reginald was a man of secrets. I heard him once, on this very yacht, speaking of a debt he could never repay. Not money, I think, but something deeper. Poirot's gaze locked on her. And when did you hear this, mademoiselle? 2 nights ago, Clara said, her eyes steady. I was on the deck, late. He did not see me. He was speaking to himself, or perhaps to someone on the telephone. He said, I cannot undo what was done. Forgive me. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them. Dr. Carver cleared his throat. Reginald was under strain, he said. I prescribed him something for nerves last month. He spoke of pressures, business, family, but he never confided specifics. Poirot's fingers steepled before him. A debt, a betrayal, a scandal. These are the threads we must follow. Tell me, Doctor, did Sir Reginald ever mention a name beginning with M? Carver's brow furrowed. Not that I recall, but he was a private man. If there was someone, he kept it close. As the guests dispersed, their alibis and stories overlapping like a tangled net, Poirot and Hastings retired to the library. Poirot opened his notebook, adding the new revelations. The letter signed M, he said. It is a clue, but also a distraction. The killer wants us to focus on the past, but the murder happened here, now. We must look at the present. Hastings frowned. Langston's motive seems strongest, business rivalry, a grudge, and the evidence points to him. Too strongly, Poirot said. The cigarette case, the scuff mark, they are like arrows pointing to his guilt. But consider, Hastings, if Langston is the killer, why leave such obvious traces? No, someone wishes us to believe it is him. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock. Jenkins entered, his face pale. Monsieur Poirot,
Too perfect. Her observations too precise. She sees much, but reveals little. As night fell, the yacht's atmosphere grew heavier, the guests' glances sharper. Poirot's questions had stirred the pot, unearthing lies and half-truths. The dagger, the letters, the mysterious M, each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. Poirot closed his notebook, his mind alight with possibilities. The lies multiply, Hastings, he said, but so do the clues. The truth is near, if we can see it. The sapphire yacht sailed on, a gilded prison where secrets festered, and Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly to untangle the web of deception. The emotional turning point. The sapphire yacht lay anchored under a sky heavy with stars, its decks silent save for the gentle lapping of waves against its hull. Within, the atmosphere was charged with a palpable dread, as if the very walls of the vessel sensed the unraveling of secrets. Hercule Poirot, his meticulous mind a beacon in the gathering storm, sat in the library, his notebook a tapestry of clues and contradictions. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the fireplace, his soldier's frame tense, his thoughts a whirl of suspicion and unease. The discovery of the blood-stained dagger had sharpened the mystery, and the guests' guarded answers had only deepened the shadows. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice low but resonant, we approach a turning point. The lies we have uncovered, the cigarette case, the scuff mark, the letters signed M, they point to a truth buried in emotion. Someone aboard this yacht harbors a wound deeper than the one that killed Sir Reginald. We must find it. Hastings nodded, his eyes on the dagger, now wrapped in a cloth on the table. That dagger, Poirot, it's too ornate to be ordinary. Could it belong to one of the guests? Clara, perhaps, with her theatrical flair. Poirot's lips twitched. A possibility, Hastings, but we must not leap to conclusions. The dagger is a clue, yes, but its significance lies in its owner. We shall trace its origin, but first, we must press the guests further. Emotion, mon ami, is the key to unlocking their secrets. The morning began with a summons to the lounge, where Poirot had requested the guests assemble. The air was thick with tension and deliberate. The investigation into Sir Reginald's murder reveals a web of deceit. A dagger has been found, stained with blood, hidden in the galley. I ask you now, who among you recognizes this weapon? He produced the dagger, holding it aloft, its ornate handle catching the light. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. Lady Margaret's fan snapped shut, her face paling. Langston's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Clara Duval's gaze lingered on the dagger, her expression unreadable, while Dr. Carver's eyes narrowed, as if calculating. "Where did you find that?" Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. "In the galley," Poirot said, his gaze fixed on her. "Hidden, as if its owner wished it to remain undiscovered. Do you know it, mademoiselle?" Evelyn shook her head, but her hands twisted in her lap. It looks like something my father kept in his study, a gift from a business associate years ago, but I can't be sure." Poirot's eyes flicked to the others. "And you, Lady Margaret? Monsieur Langston? Mademoiselle Duval? Dr. Carver?" Lady Margaret's voice was shrill. "I've never seen it. It's ghastly to think such a thing was used to... She trailed off, fanning herself vigorously. Langston's tone was curt. "Not mine. I don't collect trinkets." Clara Duval spoke softly. "It is beautiful, in a tragic way, but I have no claim to it." Carver shrugged. "I've seen similar in collections, but not this one. It's distinctive, Persian perhaps." Poirot nodded, tucking the dagger away. "Merci. We shall return to this. But now, let us speak of Sir Reginald's past. Mademoiselle Evelyn, you mentioned a betrayal. Can you recall any name, any detail, that might point to his enemies?" Evelyn's composure wavered, her eyes glistening. "I've told you what I know, Monsieur Poirot. My father was a good man, but he made choices that hurt others. I heard him once, years ago, speak of a man named Mortimer. He said he regretted what happened, but it was too late." The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Lady Margaret gasped, her fan dropping to the floor. "Mortimer?" she said, her voice shawl. Carver's expression remained impassive, but his eyes flicked to Lady Margaret with a trace of disdain. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "And this Mortimer, did he have family? Someone who might hold a grudge?" Lady Margaret hesitated, then nodded. "A daughter, I believe, Mary, or perhaps Margaret. She was young then, but the scandal ruined her prospects. I don't know what became of her." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A daughter, and the letter signed M. Most interesting. Merci, Lady Margaret." As the guests dispersed, their faces a gallery of unease, Evelyn lingered, her voice breaking as she spoke to Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot, I can't bear this. My father, he wasn't perfect, but he didn't deserve this. Please find who did it." Poirot placed a hand on her arm, his tone kind but resolute. "I will, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot does not fail." In the library, Poirot shared the revelation with Hastings. "Mortimer," he said, adding the name to his notebook. "A man betrayed, a daughter wronged. The letter M, it could be her, or another seeking to use her name. We must learn more of this scandal." Hastings frowned. Could Lady Margaret be involved? She seemed shaken by the name. "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but her shock was genuine. She hides much but not murder. No, the killer is more subtle, more controlled. The dagger, the letters, they are pieces of a performance, meant to mislead." Their conversation was interrupted by Jenkins, who entered with a tray of tea, his hands unsteady. "Monsieur Poirot, sir, there's something else. The crew's been talking. One of the deckhands saw Miss Duval on the deck last night, after 10, near the stairs. She was pacing, like she was waiting for someone." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Pacing, you say? Most interesting. Merci, Jenkins." As the steward left, Hastings leaned in. "Clara again. She admitted to seeing Sir Reginald, but pacing. Could she be hiding something?" Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "She sees more than she says, Hastings. Her calm is a mask, but what lies beneath? We must watch her closely." The yacht's bell rang, signaling dinner, but the meal was a somber affair. Arthur Hastings stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back.
his thoughts tangled with the revelations of the day. The air was heavy with anticipation, as if the yacht itself awaited the next act in this deadly drama. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a quiet blade cutting through the silence. "We have reached a critical moment. The killer believes they have outwitted us, hiding behind red herrings and half-truths. But Hercule Poirot does not chase shadows. Tonight, we set a trap to draw them into the light." Hastings turned, his brow furrowed. "A trap, Poirot? How do you mean?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with a sly intensity. "The murderer is clever, but they are human, and humans falter under pressure. We shall gather the guests and apply the psychological pressure, subtle but relentless. They will reveal themselves through a word, a glance, a moment of weakness." Hastings nodded, though uncertainty lingered. "The dagger points to someone with access to Sir Reginald's study. And this Mortimer business, could it really be his daughter, seeking revenge?" Poirot's lips twitched. "The daughter of Mortimer is a possibility, but the letters, the dagger, they are too theatrical, too deliberate. The killer wishes us to follow this trail, but I suspect it leads to a deeper truth. Come, let us prepare." The lounge was arranged for the evening's gathering, its opulent furnishings, velvet chairs, a gleaming chandelier, cast in a somber glow by the flickering wall sconces. The guests assembled, their faces a gallery of guarded emotions. Evelyn Ashbourne sat near the fireplace, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes haunted by grief and fear. Dr. Lionel Carver leaned against a pillar, his calm facade showing faint cracks of unease. Lady Margaret Thorne clutched her fan, her diamonds glinting as she fidgeted nervously. Victor Langston stood by the bar, his expression hard, his fingers drumming an impatient rhythm. Clara Duval sat apart, her serene posture a stark contrast to the room's tension, her eyes watchful as ever. Poirot entered, his small figure commanding the room with quiet authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate. "The investigation into Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder nears its climax. Tonight, I will scene, and a scuff mark on the deck matches his shoe. Yet I say to you now, these are distractions." Langston's face darkened, his voice sharp. "What are you implying, Poirot? I've told you, I dropped that case earlier. I was in my cabin by 10. Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "Perhaps, Monsieur Langston, but let us consider another detail. The dagger, found hidden in the galley, is of Persian design, a gift to Sir Reginald, kept in his study. Who had access to that room? Mademoiselle Evelyn, you knew of it. Lady Margaret, you admired his collections. Mademoiselle Duval, you have an eye for beauty. Dr. Carver, you treated him there. Monsieur Langston, you met him there for business." The guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting to one another. Evelyn's voice trembled. "I never touched that dagger, Monsieur Poirot. It was father's, but I hadn't seen it in years." Lady Margaret's fan snapped shut. "This is outrageous. I collect jewels, not weapons." Clara Duval's voice was soft but clear. "A dagger is a tool, Monsieur Poirot, like any other, but I have no need of such things." Carver's tone was dry. "I'm a physician, not a collector. I saw it on his desk once, but that's all." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "And yet, one of you took it, one of you used it, and one of you wrote the letters signed M, invoking the name of Charles Mortimer, a man wronged by Sir Reginald years ago. Who among you knows of Mortimer's daughter?" The room fell silent, the name a thunderbolt. Lady Margaret's hands trembled, her voice barely a whisper. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot. She was called Mary, I think, but she disappeared after the scandal." Evelyn's eyes widened. "Mary Mortimer. I remember her. She was my age, a friend when we were children. Father never spoke of her after the scandal." Poirot's gaze swept the room, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "And yet, the letter M suggests her presence, or her memory. Someone here knows more than they say. I will give you this chance. Speak now, or the truth will be drawn out by other means." The silence was suffocating, broken only by a sudden sob from Evelyn. She rose, her face crumpling, her voice raw. I can't bear this. Guilt can drive others to desperation, she said softly. Carver's voice was sharp. Enough of this. Evelyn's grief is real, but it doesn't solve the murder. Poirot, what are you playing at? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. I play at nothing, Doctor. I observe, I listen, and I deduce. Mademoiselle Evelyn's confession is a step toward the truth, but there is more. The cry at 10:15. Who made it? Not Sir Reginald, for the wound was instantaneous. Someone else was on the deck, someone who saw or did something. He turned to Clara. Mademoiselle Duval, you were seen pacing near the stairs after 10. Why? Clara's composure faltered, her fingers tightening on her shawl. I was restless. The sea air helps me think. I saw no one but Sir Reginald, as I told you. Poirot's gaze held hers. And yet, you paced, as if waiting. For whom? Clara looked away, her voice barely audible. No one. The tension in the room was palpable, each guest a coiled spring. Poirot stepped back, his voice calm but commanding. I leave you with this thought. The truth cannot hide forever. Tomorrow I will reveal more. Until then, remain vigilant. As the guests dispersed, their faces etched with fear and suspicion, Hastings leaned in. You've rattled them, Poirot. Evelyn's confession, Clara's hesitation. Do you think one of them is M? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The trap is set, Hastings. They are uneasy, and unease breeds mistakes. The killer will act, and when they do, we will be ready. The yacht's bell rang, signaling the end of another fraught day. The trap was laid, and Poirot's little grey cells were poised to catch their prey, her gaze steady but guarded. Poirot entered, his presence commanding silence. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice clear and resonant. The time has come to unravel the mystery of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder. A crime has been committed aboard this yacht, a closed world where no one could flee. The killer is among us, and tonight, Hercule Poirot will reveal their name. A murmur rippled through the room, but Poirot raised a hand, his eyes sharp. Let us begin with the facts. At 9 o'clock, Sir Reginald received a note at dinner. You cannot hide your sins forever. Tonight, you pay. At 9:45, he went to the upper deck, alone. At 10, Mademoiselle Duval saw him there, staring at the sea. At 10:15, a cry was heard, and Sir Reginald was found dead, stabbed with a Persian dagger from his study. A cigarette case, belonging to Monsieur Langston, was found near the scene, and a scuff mark on the deck matched his shoe. Letters signed M spoke of betrayal, invoking the name of Charles Mortimer, a man wronged by Sir Reginald years ago. These are the threads of our tapestry. Now, let us weave them together. He turned to Langston, whose face was a mask of controlled anger. Monsieur Langston, the evidence points to you. The cigarette case, the scuff mark, your dispute with Sir Reginald over a failed merger. You had motive and opportunity. Yet I say to you now, you are not the killer. Langston's eyes widened, but he said nothing. The room stirred, Lady Margaret's fan snapping shut. Not him? She gasped. Then who? Poirot's gaze swept the room. The evidence against Monsieur Langston is too perfect, too deliberate. The cigarette case, left in plain sight. The scuff mark, matching his shoe too precisely. These are red herrings, placed to mislead. The true killer is more subtle, more cunning. Let us consider the dagger. He produced the ornate weapon, its blade still faintly stained. This dagger was taken from Sir Reginald's study, a room accessible to all but known best to Mademoiselle Evelyn. Yet she did not use it. Her grief is genuine, her confession of her father's guilt a mark of honesty. No, the dagger was taken by another, someone who— Mademoiselle Duval, our Mary Mortimer. A gasp filled the room. Clara's eyes widened, but she did not deny it. Poirot continued, his voice steady. You changed your name, became an actress, hid your past, but you never forgot. The letters were yours, a warning to Sir Reginald. You came aboard this yacht to confront him, to demand justice, And when he refused, you killed him." Clara's voice was barely audible. "You have no proof, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot's smile was grim. "Oh, but I do. The cry at 10:15 was not Sir Reginald's. It was yours, a moment of anguish as you struck. The dagger, taken from his study, was a symbol of your father's ruin, a fitting weapon for your revenge. You placed the cigarette case to implicate Langston, whose ambition made him an easy target. The scuff mark was a mistake, made as you fled, but it was not Langston's shoe. It was yours, disguised by wearing his shoes, which you later returned." Clara's composure cracked, her eyes glistening. "You cannot understand, Monsieur Poirot. My father, he was everything to me. Sir Reginald destroyed him, left us with nothing. I waited years, planned every detail. He admitted his guilt to me that night, but he offered no remorse, only excuses. I could not let him live." Evelyn sobbed, her hands covering her face. Lady Margaret's fan fell to the floor. Langston's expression softened, a flicker of relief crossing his face. Carver's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "Your pain, mademoiselle, is real, but murder is not justice. You have confessed, and the truth is revealed. The crew will ensure you are held until we reach shore." Clara, Mary, nodded, her shoulders sagging. "I am tired, Monsieur Poirot. I have carried this burden too long." As the crew led her away, the room fell silent, the weight of the truth settling over the guests. Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression somber. "A tragedy, Hastings, born of old wounds and unforgiven sins. The little grey cells have done their work, but the heart, it mourns." The sapphire yacht remained still, its opulence a hollow shell. The mystery was solved, but the scars it left would... Expression troubled, the weight of the tragedy lingering in his mind. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft but resonant. "The case is solved, the murderer revealed. Yet, as always, the resolution brings not only clarity, but also a certain melancholy. The human heart, it is a complex thing, no?" Hastings nodded, his hands clasped behind his back. "It's hard to believe Clara, Mary Mortimer, I mean, carried that grudge for so long. To plan a murder so meticulously, to hide her identity as an actress. It's chilling, Poirot." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint, wistful smile. Chilling, perhaps, but also profoundly human. Revenge, Hastings, is a fire that burns slowly, fed by memory and pain. Mademoiselle Duval was consumed by it, her life shaped by her father's ruin. Yet in her confession, there was relief, a release from the burden she carried. They stood in silence for a moment, the gentle lapping of waves filling the void. Below, the crew moved quietly, preparing the yacht for its return to the Dorset coast, where the authorities awaited to take Clara into custody. The guests, too, were subdued, their early attentions replaced by a weary acceptance. Evelyn Ashbourne had retreated to her cabin, her grief now mingled with the shock of her father's past sins. Dr. Lionel Carver maintained his stoic demeanour, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of sympathy for Evelyn. Lady Margaret Thorne, her usual flamboyance dimmed, spoke little, her fan idle in her lap. Victor Langston, cleared of suspicion, had regained his sharp-edged confidence, though he kept his distance from the others. Hastings broke the silence, his voice low. "Do you think she'll face justice, Poirot? Mary, I mean. Or will her story sway the courts?" Poirot's gaze remained on the horizon. "Justice, Hastings, is a matter for the courts, not for Hercule Poirot. My task is to uncover the truth, to bring order to chaos. Mademoiselle Duval will face the consequences of her actions, but her story, the tragedy of her father, the weight of her loss, will no doubt be heard. Whether it sways the courts, I cannot say, but I pity her in a way. To live for revenge is to live half a life." Hastings frowned, his mind turned. 10:15 was the final piece. It was not Sir Reginald, for his death was instantaneous, but her,
a cry of anguish as she struck, torn by her own act. Hastings shook his head, marveling. "You make it sound so simple, Poirot, but the letters signed M, they were hers then?" "Oui," Poirot said, producing one of the letters from his pocket. The script, elegant yet disguised, was hers. She used her father's name, Mortimer, to torment Sir Reginald, to remind him of his betrayal. Each letter was a step toward her final act, but she underestimated Hercule Poirot. Hastings chuckled despite himself. "You're insufferable when you're smug, you know." Poirot's smile widened, though it was tinged with sadness. "It is not smugness, Hastings, but confidence in the order of things. The truth, it always reveals itself to those who seek it with method and precision. Yet I take no joy in this victory. A life was taken, another ruined. The balance is restored, but at what cost?" Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Jenkins, the steward, his face drawn but respectful. "Monsieur Poirot, sir, the launch is ready to take you and Captain Hastings to shore. The police are waiting, and Miss Duval, she's been secured." Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "Merci, Jenkins. We will come shortly." As the steward retreated, Hastings glanced at Poirot. "What about Evelyn? She's lost her father, and now she knows his past wasn't as clean as she thought. Will she be all right?" Poirot's gaze softened. "Mademoiselle Evelyn is strong, Hastings. The truth is painful, but it frees her to mourn without illusion. She will carry on, as the young do, with time. But for now, we must leave her to her grief." They made their way to the lounge, where the guests had gathered for a final farewell. Evelyn stood as Poirot entered, her eyes red but resolute. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady. "Thank you. It doesn't bring father back, but knowing the truth, it helps, somehow." Poirot bowed slightly, his tone gentle. "Mademoiselle, your courage honors your father's memory. Hercule Poirot is at your service, always." Lady Margaret, her usual vivacity subdued, offered a nod. "You're a marvel, Monsieur."
Duval, now Mary Mortimer, stood silently, her serene mask gone, her face etched with resignation. As she was led away, she met Poirot's eyes, a flicker of acknowledgement passing between them. Back on land, Poirot and Hastings stood on the Dorset coast, the yacht a distant silhouette against the horizon. "Another case closed, Poirot," Hastings said, his tone wistful. "But it never feels like a victory, does it?" Poirot's eyes were distant, his voice soft. "No, Hastings, it is not victory, but necessity. The world must have order, and Hercule Poirot ensures it, one truth at a time." With that, he turned, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel, and walked toward the waiting car, leaving the sapphire yacht and its sorrowful secrets behind. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The Dorset coast stretched before the sapphire yacht, its cliffs bathed in the soft light of late afternoon, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had unfolded aboard the vessel. Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the shore, the salty breeze tugging at their coats as they watched the yacht's silhouette fade against the horizon. The case was closed. Clara Duval, revealed as Mary Mortimer, confessed to the murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, and the police had taken her into custody. Yet, an air of unease lingered, as if the truth, though uncovered, had left ripples that refused to settle. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "The truth has been revealed, but its echoes remain. The sapphire yacht was a stage for tragedy, and though the curtain has fallen, the players are forever changed." Hastings adjusted his hat, his expression troubled. "It's hard to shake it off, Poirot. Clara, Mary, was so composed, so ordinary. To think she carried that hatred for years, planning every step. And Evelyn, poor girl, learning her father's past like that. It's a lot to bear." Poirot's green eyes, sharp as ever, turned to the sea. "The human heart, Hastings, is a labyrinth. Mary Mortimer's was consumed by vengeance, but it was also broken by loss. Evelyn's is wounded, but it is strong. They will both carry their burdens, but in different cry. All point to Mary Mortimer. Her motive was clear, her opportunity perfect. The cigarette case and scuff mark were her attempts to mislead, though she underestimated Hercule Poirot. They reached the inn, a quaint establishment with ivy-clad walls and a crackling fire in the lounge. Poirot settled into an armchair, his small frame dwarfed by the high back, while Hastings ordered tea. The warmth of the room was a welcome contrast to the chill of the case, but the conversation returned to the yacht. Evelyn's confession about her father's guilt, Hastings said, stirring his tea. It was the key, wasn't it? It gave you the link to Mortimer. Oui, Poirot said, sipping his tisane with delicate precision. Her words confirmed the past that Mary Mortimer sought to avenge. Sir Reginald's betrayal of Charles Mortimer was the spark, but the letters, the dagger, they were the fuel. Mary planned her revenge with the patience of an artist, but her cry, that moment of anguish, betrayed her heart. Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. And the other guests? Lady Margaret, Carver, Langston, they all had their secrets. Could any of them have been involved? Poirot's eyes gleamed. A good question, mon ami. Lady Margaret's gossip revealed the scandal, but her shock was genuine. She is no murderer, only a collector of tales. Dr. Carver's calm was professional, not criminal. His medical knowledge confirmed the wound, nothing more. Langston's ambition made him a convenient target, but his anger was not that of a killer. No, Mary acted alone, though the others' secrets added to the fog of suspicion. The inn's clock chimed, marking the hour, and Hastings glanced at it, his thoughts drifting to the yacht's guests. What will happen to them now? Evelyn especially, she's lost so much. Poirot set down his cup, his expression softening. Mademoiselle Evelyn will grieve, but she is resilient. The truth, though painful, frees her from the illusion of her father's perfection. She will rebuild, perhaps with greater wisdom. As for the others, they return to their lives, their secrets a little lighter for being exposed. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young policeman entered, his face respectful but serious. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, a message from the station. Miss Duval, for catching me, but for understanding. You saw the truth, not just the crime, but why. My father, he deserved better, but I was wrong to think I could right that wrong with blood. Poirot's gaze was gentle but unwavering. Mademoiselle, your pain was real, but your path was a tragedy. Justice will decide your fate, but I hope you find peace. Mary nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I am ready to face it. The weight is gone at least. As they left the station, Hastings was quiet, the encounter lingering in his mind. She seemed almost relieved, Poirot, after all that. Oui, Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. To confess is to unburden the soul, even if the consequences are grave. She carried her hatred too long, it consumed her. Now, she is free, in a way. They returned to the inn, the setting sun casting long shadows across the coast. Poirot paused at the door, his eyes distant. This case, Hastings, reminds us that the past is never truly past. It lives in the hearts of those who remember, and sometimes it kills. Hastings nodded, his thoughts heavy. And what now, Poirot? Back to London? Another case? Poirot's smile was faint but resolute. To London, oui. But first, a moment of rest. The little grey cells, they require repose after such a storm. But fear not, mon ami, there will always be another mystery. They entered the inn, the fire's warmth a small comfort against the echoes of the sapphire yacht. The case was closed, but its lessons, of vengeance, redemption, and the fragility of the human heart, would linger, as enduring as the sea itself.